and welcome to Valuechain News. I am Naomi Oleribe. First, the headlines. NCDMB set to host summit on midstream and downstream operations. IADC tax operators on skill acquisition for enhanced productivity. Federal government advances strategy to actualize net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2060. And now, the news in detail. The Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board (NCDMB) has concluded plans to host the maiden edition of the Nigerian Content Midstream and Downstream Oil and Gas Stakeholder Summit with the theme Maximizing Potentials in the Midstream and Downstream Oil and Gas Sector, a Local Content Perspective. The summit will be held on May 23rd and 24th, 2022 at the Lagos Continental Hotel, Victoria Island, Lagos, and will also be hosted on Zoom for optimum participation of industry stakeholders. Announcing the workshop on Wednesday, the Executive Secretary NCDMB, Engineer Simbi Wabote, explained that the Nigerian oil and gas industry had witnessed major projects in the midstream and downstream sectors of the oil and gas industry in the last 6 years. He listed some of the projects to include the NLNG Train 7 project, the AKK gas pipeline, the Dangote 650,000 barrels per day refinery, amongst others. He added that the NCDMB has also made huge investments in modular refineries, LPG storage and bottling plants and depot, amongst other inventions. The federal government is advancing a strategy to actualize net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2060. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Mr. Hassan Musa, disclosed this during an inaugural speech of a steering committee for elaboration of Nigeria's long-term low emissions development strategy. The Director, Human Resources Management, Mr. Lawrence Adigwe, who represented the Permanent Secretary, said that the committee was inaugurated for the elaboration of Nigeria's long-term low emissions development strategy to build on the initial long-term vision by 2050. During COP26 in Glasgow, President Muhammadu Buhari announced a new long-term commitment of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2060. Towards this end, Mr. President signed a new climate bill that creates 5-year emission budgets to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions between 2050 and 2070 into law. To realize these initiatives, the federal government will now build on the initial long-term vision and the subsequent long-term commitment by the President to develop a full long-term strategy, he said. The chairman of the Nigerian chapter of the International Association of Drilling Contractors (IADC), Chuks Enwereji, has advised operators in the drilling sector to retool their skills so they can take advantage of the boom in the oil and gas sector. Enwereji spoke while delivering the welcome address in the association's 2022 yearly Health, Safety and Environment Awards and Technical session recently. He explained that the fundamental drivers for determining fuel demand projections in all sectors are derived through iterative modeling, adding that prices for gas and oil in the world economy reflect the price levels that will be needed to stimulate sufficient investment in supply to meet the projected demands. Analysts see this as an indicator that the world may be entering a new super cycle, which will be defined by a long period of strong demand and some constraints on supply, leading to high prices for energy and other commodities, he said. South Sudan President Salva Kiir has summoned the Minister of Finance and Planning, Honorable Agag Achul, and the Governor of the Central Bank, Moses Makor Deng, to clarify the recent statement by the minister on the status of the nation's economy. According to the Presidential Press Unit, President Kiir summoned the two officials on Wednesday to explain the utilization of oil proceeds of the country. Addressing the media after the meeting, Finance Minister Agag Achul said he was misquoted in the recent statement. The minister explained that what he meant was the crude oil spreadsheet and commitments on the developmental projects were spread out until 2027, and that he didn't mean that South Sudan has sold out its oil in advance. President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela has presented OPEC Secretary General His Excellency Mohamed Sanusi Barkindo with the highest civilian honor in Venezuela, the Order of General Francisco de Miranda, First Class. The award is in recognition of the Secretary General's outstanding stewardship of OPEC for the last 6 years. The ceremony was televised live by the Venezuelan national broadcaster and attended by high-level Venezuelan dignitaries and members of the diplomatic corps. Barkindo was received by Maduro at the Miraflores Palace, Caracas, where they held a working meeting to discuss ongoing developments in the oil markets. The Order of Francisco de Miranda is conferred by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in memory of Francisco de Miranda, Venezuela and Latin American independence hero who is considered one of the most influential Venezuelans in modern history. The national honor recognizes Venezuelan citizens and foreigners who have made an indelible contribution to the progress of the country, exemplifying outstanding merit. President Maduro praised the Secretary General as an exceptional leader who have been instrumental in navigating the oil industry through two oil price cycles, the 2014 to 2016 downturn caused by supply outpacing demand and the 2020 contraction of demand due to the COVID-19 pandemic. President Maduro commended the Secretary General's lifetime commitment to combating energy poverty. He praised the Secretary General's advocacy that nobody on the planet should be left behind in energy transition. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Godwin Emefiele, has reasoned that investors should consider fear of missing out FOMO when investing in Africa. Emefiele, represented by his deputy and board chairman of AFC, Dr. Kingsley Obiora, disclosed this at the Africa Finance Corporation AFC Live Infrastructure Solutions Summit. He said Africa had seen several crises in the last 2 years, each with serious consequences for the continent's economy, and called on African governments, central banks, corporate leaders and investors to rally together and be bolder in our ambitions and support our continental champions and institutions like AFC. The Apex Bank boss maintained that the crisis has given Africa a new sense of urgency about increasing its self-reliance in the manufacturing and processing of basic goods, saying the Ukraine issue had economic ramifications for the African continent. He stated that Africa needs to partake actively in generating funding both home and abroad. Before we end the news, here's a recap of our headlines. NCDMB set to host summit on midstream and downstream operations. IADC tax operators on skill acquisition for enhanced productivity. Federal government advances strategy to actualize net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2060. And that's the news. I am Naomi Oleribe. Good evening.